I would like to introduce to you Marie Stuart Edwards' two grandsons, Burton and Stuart Edwards. Thank you.
My baby brother knows how to use audio-visual equipment. I do not. I want to let you know that we're delighted to be asked to be back home again in Indiana. And definitely thank the governor, constituents, unfortunate people who don't live in Indiana who've come here today. And just to talk a little bit, maybe a couple of things about my grandmother. To us, she was known as Mom, and there couldn't be a more doting grandmother. The first thing I wanted to mention was her ability to organize. She could organize anything. And when we came here, we were here for a weekend or maybe a week. We would do more here under her guidance than we would at home in 6 months. So she was pretty energetic. I got a book from Regine last night, and it's very educational, because we really didn't know that much about our grandparents. And there are a couple of family trees in here, and you could kind of trace down the lineage from colonial times, and I noticed that at the very bottom, my brother and I have been lovingly represented as two sons. The other thing I wanted to mention was, if those of you who have fans, if you'll look at the big picture of my grandmother in the middle, her eyes they're kind of sneaky. She had considerable political acumen, and it was this, I think there was definitely an element of sneaking in her ability to get things done locally and nationally. And the example I'm going to give is that when my mother first seriously met my father, she met him in passing out east once. It was at a party in Lake Maxinkuckee that my grandparents were having to announce the engagement of my father to a different woman. Now, my grandmother was not crazy about this intended marriage, and so knowing that this poor lady was allergic to everything in sight, she filled the house with goldenrods, something. The poor woman was totally incapacitated for the entire weekend. My mom got to spend some time with my dad, and the rest is history. So never underestimate the power of energy or sneakiness. And my brother has a few words to say.
So as the younger brother, I'm going second, because this way my older brother, who I have to tell you is shorter by 3/4 of an inch, that's very important, so he says. This way he can't correct anything I say. So Marie Stuart Edwards, aka grandmother, aka mom, never quite got used to that one, was a formidable person. A proud lady, a woman to be reckoned with, and sometimes simply a pushover as a granny. During my lifetime, she could most often be found at her command post just inside the front door of 50 North Hood Street. She was sadly crippled by arthritis all of my life, and her physical world centered on the chair just to the left of the front door. From this position, she could look left and see the living room and porch beyond. Straight ahead, she commanded views of the stairway and the door to my grandfather's office, and to the right, she surveyed the dining room. Absolutely nothing got past her. From this post, she invited, or perhaps we should say a command performance, that my brother and I would join her in games of Old Maid or famous authors. Card games which we were hopeless at, but she was an absolute card shark. She was also a softie. My dad, our dad, Richard Edwards III, was her only child, and she would absolutely gush when he arrived for a visit to Peru. When Stuart and I ran in, well, that gushing granny turned to a cheek-pinching, totally passion-filled Grammy. How could she spoil us this visit? What had she planned? There was always something, as Stuart alluded to. And I am certain, and remember, he can't correct me on this, I am certain that one time there was even a pony in the stall at the back of the barn at 50 North Hood Street, and we rode it all over the yard there. Another bit of family lore, as I recall it, during a visit to the World's Fair in St. Louis in 1904, and this would be shortly before she and my grandfather were married, she went to a fortune teller on the Midway. There were two predictions. First, that she would have 4 children, but really only one. She had 3 miscarriages and then gave birth to my father. And second, that her voice would move many people. Well, Marie, with her normal energy, went forth and was turned away by a seemingly endless series of well-known vocal coaches because she absolutely could not carry a tune. But later, she became known as the woman we celebrate here today, an ardent and most vocal advocate for the women's right to vote. And she had numerous speaking tours across the country. Our dad told us that she was often the only woman in the smoke-filled rooms where Indiana politics played out. She was not shy about expressing her opinions or seeing that they were carried out. Later, she served on the state parole board, and our dad also told us that she never met a potential parolee that she didn't like. She also adored this sickeningly sweet maple sugar candy. And to this day, it's something that I absolutely cannot stand. And although today is Marie's day, I come here as her grandson, as a man, as a feminist. I would also like to honor my grandfather and to rephrase an old adage, behind every great woman, there is a great man. I only just learned that they met at Lake Maxinkuckee as pre-teens. Something apparently clicked, and a dozen years later, they entered a marriage that would last for over 65 years. He stood behind her, often literally during her political adventures, but also freely granted her great freedom at a time when that was not the norm. From all I can tell, the pair of them were true Hoosiers. Their families came to Indiana from Massachusetts and Connecticut in the early 1800s. They went east to college, he to Harvard and she to Smith, where she was reportedly the first woman from Lafayette to attend Smith College. And although my grandfather rarely spoke of Harvard, he often recalled his studies in agriculture at Purdue. He said he learned things in Lafayette that he could actually use. During my lifetime, I recall them only leaving the state twice. Once to babysit Stuart and me in Illinois, circa 1960. This adventure ended badly, and babysitting was clearly not their thing. The second trip was to visit us after we moved to Iowa. And I remember my grandfather attempting to give me a driving lesson in what he referred to as his baby Buick. And during that time, he was completely disinterested in my driving, which he actually should have been paying attention to, but instead was far more anxious about the goings-on at the farm back here in Peru. And here I'd like to also give a shout-out to the Vance sisters, who I believe are here in the front row. Their dad, Keith Vance, ran the farms with and for my grandfather. Both my grandparents had the deepest of affections for Keith and his family. I'd also like to acknowledge Jessie Dulce Radcliffe, if any of her family is here. I don't know, I'm not aware of that. But she was a wonderful woman who cared for my grandparents during many of their later years. She also listened to every one of my grandmother's stories and recorded some of them. In closing, I want to thank you for honoring my grandmother and her achievements with this very thoughtful statue that I haven't yet seen, but I've seen pictures of it, by Cindy Billingsley. And finally, I have to tell you, though, I can't imagine the grandmother I knew commanding, proud, and wheelchair-bound on a bicycle. But Marie did everything else she put her mind to, so I wouldn't put it past her. Thank you very much.